Between Heaven and Earth, an internet radio talk show where we help you connect spirit and divine guidance. Lisa Kay, your host, brings you shows that can enhance and transform your life with tips and new ideas for more happiness, abundance, and better relationships. Lisa is an expert on intuition and can show you how to strengthen your inner guidance to empower yourself. Each show is positive and uplifting to inspire your day. Her guest speakers are specialists on self-help, positive thinking, spirituality, and conscious living. Be the best that you can be with Between Heaven and Earth, conscious living for your soul.
And angel blessings to everyone. Our show today is called Tap into Your Genius with Spiritual Telepathy. And our special guest today is Colleen Mauro. Through a more advanced form of intuitive perception that she calls spiritual telepathy, you can access the wisdom of your soul, and through your soul, make contact with the divine or universal mind. Colleen points out that many of our most celebrated creative thinkers, those people we call geniuses or visionaries, have had the ability to access the subtle realms. And in their writings, they speak of the soul as the portal to a universal source of inspiration. Spiritual telepathy is dedicated to the proposition that we can all access this portal. And today we're going to talk to Colleen about her new book, Spiritual Telepathy, Ancient Techniques to Access the Wisdom of Your Soul, and find out how you can tap into your genius. Now, Colleen Mauro is the creator and publisher of Intuition, a magazine for the higher potential of the mind, back in 1988. Her 30 years of experience in magazine publishing includes work as a publisher, editor, advertising director, and circulation and marketing consultant. Intuition explored the higher potential of the mind and the many and varied ways of knowing, intuition, inspiration, and telepathy, and providing both research and how-to information in an easy-to-read form for the general reader. So welcome, Colleen. I'm so happy that you're on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is really exciting. It's right up my alley in terms of using your intuition, developing it so that you can use it in your everyday life. And I find your book just really the pinnacle of where it is that we want to go with our intuition, and why I like to teach people that, because teach them how to develop their intuition, because I think it's all about connecting into, as we spoke about in the introduction, that higher genius and so on. So can you start out by defining or explaining to us a little bit more in depth what spiritual telepathy is?
Spiritual telepathy is communication from the subtle worlds, from our own souls, or from higher beings. And communication on this level is always telepathic. We don't audibly hear the information. The information is dropped into our brains where it becomes part of our conscious awareness.
Interesting. And do you believe that, is it through this spiritual telepathy that these geniuses that we were talking about earlier, is that how they're getting their genius?
Absolutely. The wisdom teachings tell us that the soul is the portal to the higher worlds, to the divine or universal mind. Mm-hmm. And that's where information on all topics can be found. And
all topics. Wow, that's fascinating.
It was fascinating. When I researched this, what I discovered was that many of the people we call geniuses were describing this exact kind of experience. One of my all-time favorite books was Higher Creativity, written by the late Willis Harman. He was the former president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I think it came out in 1984. And in this book, he looked at the biographies of many artists, writers, composers, scientists, and inventors, and discovered that their greatest achievements came from an intuitive breakthrough.
Wow, that's great. What could you give us his name again?
Willis Harman. The book is, Higher Creativity. I think it's still in print. But when I started my book, I went back and I read that book again, and I looked at his original sources, and I read the full text of many of the interviews that he quoted in the book.
Oh, wow.
And what I discovered is over and over, they were talking about their creative process in exactly the way it's explained in the wisdom teachings.
Was there one that stuck out in your mind that you thought was really, really cool that you could share with us?
Well, there's a lot of them. I quoted a lot from a book called Talks with Great Composers that was written in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
An American violinist called Arthur Abel interviewed Puccini, Brahms, Strauss, and Wagner, and other well-known composers about the source of their creative genius. And I was fascinated by the consistency of their experience. They talked over and over about contacting the soul, and it was through the soul that they had a flood of information just descend into their brains. And
what was the consistency? What was it that they were all doing?
They were all contacting the soul. Some of it called a higher source or my higher self.
Wow.
But they were all describing the same thing.
Did they do it the same way? Did they describe how they did it?
No, most of them seemed to do it spontaneously.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that, like, darn, I want to know exactly what they did. I want to do that.
Well, we think that genius is just bestowed on people, and it's a rare and random event. But what I discovered in researching this topic is that there's a training, there's a method that any of us can take to access that portal and have that flow of information.
How did you find
in our
that
lives.
out? How did you discover that?
Well, I had studied intuition extensively, as you know, and I started studying the Ageless Wisdom teachings. And right away, I got into that teaching about how the soul is the portal to this higher level. And I could see immediately that it was the higher, more advanced level of the intuition work that I did earlier. And I got very excited about it and just started reading and spent years studying this topic.
So what is Ageless Wisdom teachings?
Well, the Ageless Wisdom teachings are also known as the esoteric or mystery teachings. And they were once taught in the mystery schools in Egypt, Greece, Babylon, and India. They were first put into book form by the Hindu sage Patanjali in his classic book, the Yoga Sutras. And it's the basic wisdom or teaching that exists at the heart of all of our religions.
Well, okay. Oh, all right. So the heart of all our religions. That's interesting. So this is the esoteric teachings. And out of this is what all the religions sprung from, or were they based on, or?
Yes. Yeah, there's the exoteric or outer teachings. There's the esoteric or inner teachings. And when I looked for the parallels in other traditions, it was fascinating to me. I found it in Hinduism, Buddhism, esoteric Christianity, in the Kabbalah, in Sufism. They're all basically saying the same thing.
And, one of the things I noticed as well in a similar line of study, when I was studying about intuition and those abilities, was that it was always interesting how intuitive and psychic abilities seem to be the byproduct of the process of someone being on the spiritual path and reaching nirvana or that enlightenment. So as they were doing their spiritual practices and, these stories from the saints, as they go through the process of whatever those practices are, eventually they started to have these intuitive skills and amazing psychic abilities, which to them wasn't really important. What they said, that was just, oh, well, that's part of who we are, and that's nice, but that's not the goal. The goal is to connect within to the divine, which I thought was fascinating. It sounds like that's similar to what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And Patanjali talks about this. He said the first doorway, so to speak, is going to be the psychic realm. That's considered contacting the astral or emotional plane. And he says very clearly, don't get too excited about that. Don't get distracted. This is just a stage. And that as we evolve and continue to create a deeper practice, then we touch into higher levels. We touch into the soul and the levels beyond. And that's really where we want to get to. The psychic realm is, he considered it just kind of a distraction.
Yeah, it just is. And then, so then, did you talk about getting into the next realm, that, beyond the psychic realm, and what, did they talk about the experience of what it's like?
They do, actually.
And what did they say it was like?
The next realm is the mental realm, and it's really through this type of mind training that I have been practicing and writing about that we can access the soul. The soul is in the higher mental plane, and there's a gap, so to speak, between the lower mind and the higher mind, and it's through our meditation practice, through a type of meditation called creative meditation, that we build a symbolic bridge between the lower and the higher mind.
Okay.
And when we've done that, then we have direct access to the soul and through the soul
What
to
is
the higher worlds.
creative meditation?
Meditation is a type of mind training, and it's a daily practice, and it goes beyond most meditation practices, which focus only on quieting the mind. In this type of meditation, we go a step further, and we actively train the mind to transmit information between the soul and the brain, and the information has to reach the brain to become part of our conscious awareness. In the same way that our homes are wired for telephone and internet connection, this type of meditation allows us to create the threads and cables that link us to the higher worlds. And we do this by projecting our attention upward to the soul day after day. We visualize the soul as a star about 6 inches above our head. And as we do this, we anchor small threads of energy that eventually, thread by thread, form a bridge between the mind, brain, and the soul. In the wisdom teaching, the bridge is called the rainbow bridge or the bridge of light. It's called the Antakarana in the Hindu text, and it's called the straight or narrow gate in the New Testament.
Wow, that's fascinating. And purely through just your thinking about this and using your thoughts.
Yeah, it's the type of training, and it's a daily practice. And what people told me and what I've discovered in my own experience is that you really need to do it every day. That when we stop, even for a few days, the energy starts to dissipate. And so then we need to build it up again. So it really is a practice.
I got to do that. I have to go back to that. And it's so hard to, and I think we could talk more about that everyday thing. I know that just even a little bit is helpful, but, stopping is not such a great thing. I'm really curious about how this all worked out for you and, what your experience was. And it's gotten me inspired really to go back and, focus again back on my own meditating and my own meditative practice. So when we come back, let's talk a lot more about, your experience and what you went through in all this. We'll be right back.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the Internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hey ladies, do you want to have that good hair day feeling all the time? Gentlemen, would you want your special someone to have that glow, letting you know she is feeling completely satisfied? This feeling and that glow can be yours by embracing your sexual power. So join me, Rachel Kenley, award-winning romance author, on the O-Spot. The O-Spot will guide you to that peak with guest interviews, book discussions, and conversations on the thrills of sexual empowerment. Put the zing back in your life. Come up and see me sometime on the O-Spot, live on Hump Day at 10 p.m. Eastern.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
And we're back. Welcome back. We are talking to Colleen Mauro about spiritual telepathy and how you can connect to your soul through some techniques and processes that Colleen's been sharing with us. And she was just talking to us about creative meditation and how you can use it. She shows people how to use that to make that connection between your conscious mind, your brain, and your soul, which has the wisdom of, everything. Right, Colleen?
Right.
And so I was very curious. You said that it worked for you to do this on a daily basis. And what experience did you have as you were doing it?
Well, first I have to tell you that I went through a lot to be able to actually do this daily.
Oh,
and
really?
I talk about
was
this
it that
in the book.
hard?
It was for me. And there were several levels of it. One is that I outed myself in the book as someone who doesn't want to get out of bed to meditate. I figure if it's true for me, it's true for everybody, or true for a lot of people.
Well, you mean get out of bed in the morning to go do this, or just do it?
I'm not a morning person.
Oh, well, I'm not either.
I spent most of my adult life in magazine publishing, and I had to jump out of bed and hit the ground running as soon as the alarm went off, and I hated it. So when I was working on this book, I suddenly had this experience of being able to honor my own rhythms. I wanted to just wake up slowly, enjoy my morning, and then meditate when I was ready. And I discovered that didn't work because my lovely, leisurely morning gave me too much time to think about the day ahead. And when I finally got around to meditating, my brain was too activated, and it was a struggle. But I still didn't want to get up as soon as I opened my eyes to train my mind. So I played around with a lot of different things and finally found something that works for me. And it's kind of unorthodox. And as I said in the book, I get thrown out of any ashram in the world. But what I do is when I wake up, I give myself about 20 minutes to read the newspaper in bed. And that allows me to wake up enough so that I don't feel like I'm jerking myself awake. And then I get up and meditate. And so it's sort of a routine. I know I have this sort of quiet period to slowly wake up. And it allows me to be consistent because I'm kind of honoring my needs and still not being self-indulgent. I know from my experience that when I force myself to do something I don't want to do, it only lasts for a couple of weeks. I think
that goes for everybody, and then it kind of goes against the grain or what you feel comfortable with. So your experience sounds perfect for other people as an example. Now, do you have to meditate? Is it important to do this type of meditation first thing in the morning, or can it be done at other times of the day?
It's best to do it in the morning before your mind gets activated. I tried everything. I did it at night for a while, and it just is so much harder.
And how long do you do it for?
Actually, you start at 10 minutes and go up to about 20 minutes, so it doesn't take a lot of time. And if you do it consistently, you really see some amazing benefits.
What are some of the benefits you see?
Well, it's really changed my life. And what happens is in this type of meditation, we ask that soul light pour down over our lower bodies to calm our minds and emotions and invigorate our physical bodies. And that daily contact with the light of the soul raises our vibration and I think speeds up our evolution. And I just have so much more peace and joy in my life now and a more consistent source of guidance and a greater understanding of the contribution I could make to the world. But I did have to go through a lot to get there. And this is something that's important for people to know, is that the first step in any kind of esoteric training is the refinement of our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. And this is really important because we have to have a clear, direct line of communication between the soul and the mind and the brain. And to do this, we have to purify the body and quiet our minds and emotions. If we have an illness, if we're tired, if we have mental or emotional static, it will make it hard for our brain to register higher wisdom.
That's interesting.
Ideas.
So there are a couple thoughts that are coming up in my mind as you're speaking. The first is the imagery that you were talking about for the meditation, which is actually making that, as I'm a scientist, I'm going, how does that really work? But the connection that you make through your mind is actually really making that connection with your soul. And I found that when I studied energy healing and metaphysical energy, I was shocked to find out that energy follows your thought and that what you do with your thoughts in terms of energy is really how you work with it. And it really works. So I love what you're saying. And that was one of the things that I was very curious about is like, well, is that enough? Is it enough to just think? And apparently it is. And here it is again with your description and experience that actually starts to make that connection for you. Now, you talked about the body and that you have to purify or you have to make it a clearer vessel so that you can make a good connection. Is that something that you do separately from the meditation, or does the meditation help you do that? How did that work out for you?
Well, you have to sort of upgrade the physical body so it's more in tune with the higher levels. And
right, how do you do that?
What I did is I interviewed a lot of people that are involved in this work, and they all said the same thing, that pure food and water is absolutely essential. Mm-hmm. And what happens, and what happened to me, is that my diet started to change. It was always pretty good, but it got better. You just eat intuitively, and your body tells you what foods it wants.
Oh, so there is now an intuitive guidance that comes. Mm-hmm. And do you think your intuition changed in this respect because of the meditation, or could you have been guided intuitively without the meditation to do the right thing for your body?
I think the meditations were absolutely essential.
So it kind of works hand in hand, but now your intuition is a little bit focused on and giving you the messages on what you should be eating. Right. Now, when you say pure food and water, what does that mean?
Healthy organic food.
Healthy organic. Yeah. Okay, which seems to be a standard thing. Water, are there different kinds of water? Was there a certain kind of water you were guided to?
No, I just started doing a reverse osmosis water, just making sure that the water is purified. Mm-hmm.
And did it take a long time for you to see results?
No, it didn't. Like I said, my diet was pretty good before. But one thing I noticed is that I've never been a meat eater, but I was eating fish and chicken, and I went through a stage where I couldn't eat any flesh. It just revolted me. And this lasted for a while, and then I started to add it back a little bit again. But I went through this, and I've heard this a lot from people. Somehow, it's like the molecules are changing in our bodies, and they're becoming lighter. And so we're drawn to
it's interesting. Food. I find this fascinating. We all think that the caveman diet was just eating meat. Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, going out to hunt and getting meat is really hard. Now, probably what the caveman was eating was probably smaller game because it's easier to catch, right? Mm-hmm. And probably not a whole lot of it because it's got to expend a lot of energy and to go catch something. You don't have to catch plants and water. It's there for you. So I believe that, and what science has said is that the diet of the caveman was actually much more along the vegetarian realm rather than the meat realm.
That makes sense.
I mean, we were hunter-gatherers, right? So we were probably more gathering than hunting.
Right. You know, what was even more important to me in this process was the emotional issue that I had to deal with. When you get really serious about quieting yourself down, any unresolved stuff is going to come bubbling up. And Jack Kornfield has talked about this a lot. When he started to teach meditation, he discovered that at least half of his students couldn't master even the basic concentration exercises because they had so much unresolved emotional issues. And he's really been a pioneer in integrating Western psychotherapy and Eastern spiritual traditions. And I really needed to do a lot of that work too. That I had so much stuff come up. I realized I was walking around with so much anger and resentment that I needed to do a lot of forgiveness work that was really hard for me. And I decided I needed some help with this, and I worked with a wonderful spiritual healer named Stephen Lumiere. And he gave me 3 prescriptions, so to speak, 3 meditations, one on loving kindness, one on forgiveness, and one on compassion. And he had me do all 3 every day for an extended period. And it really made a difference. But there was one person that I had a lot of trouble forgiving, somebody who wouldn't talk and try to resolve things. And I got so frustrated, I went to the library and I checked out every book I could find on forgiveness. And one was especially helpful, and I put some information about this in the book. This author, it was called Forgiveness is a Choice, and the author talks about how we can't really forgive somebody until we can feel compassion for them. And I'd never really thought about that. So
that's really fascinating.
I really started doing the compassion exercises extra. And it really made a difference. Finally, I was able to completely forgive. And when I did that, I was able to really calm down in a way I hadn't been before.
Do you think the compassion part of it, because I can kind of relate and think about where in my life where I would need, I think we all need to work on forgiveness, but, and we have compassion. Certainly you can have more compassion for people that you like. So how do you work with the compassion to be able to forgive somebody that, maybe you don't like?
Yeah, it's not easy.
No.
What I found is just doing the compassion exercises over and over again really helped. I have a couple of forgiveness exercises in the book. One that Stephen gave me that was particularly helpful was called the stand in their shoes exercise. Ooh. And in this, you imagine that you're looking out through the eyes of the person you need to forgive, and you get a sense of what their life is like and why they act the way they do. And it really helps you to understand them. And when you can understand and feel that compassion, it's easier to forgive because you can't help but see that if you had their exact same set of circumstances, you might act just the same way.
Actually, I love that. And that reminds me of, that I can remember times when I've needed that and it's actually worked. And I think also as your intuition is developing and you're working on that, I know that it helps you a lot in being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes because that whole intuitive skill that you develop allows you to really, know what's going on inside someone else, know what they're thinking, know what they're feeling. And I know that as an intuitive reader, that's something that I do quite often as a reader, and that, it makes me think, I could use that as a tool to help me build that compassion. Because, I don't always use it outside of reading. So, but, you should be using it every day as life is going on. Well, we're coming up to our next break. And when we do, we're going to come back and talk about your book, where people can get it, where they can connect in with you and find out more about you. So we'll be right back.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Simone Milicis would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com.
Dr. Kevin here, and I want to invite you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, to join me on the Dr. Kevin Show, where we have a diversity of guests who help you step outside the box, behind the curtain, and see what a load of crap is going on in the world today, so you have more information with which to make better decisions. We'll see you there. Namaste.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And welcome back. You are listening to Between Heaven and Earth on the OMTimes Radio Network. And we are speaking with Colleen Mauro and talking about spiritual telepathy, which is really, in my mind, the space that you want to go into and why we develop our intuitive abilities to actually open up that connection to our soul, but also to go beyond that and take us to the next level of, I would like to think, enlightenment. So we're going to take a break here and go over how you can connect with Colleen. Colleen's book is called Spiritual Telepathy, Ancient Techniques to Access the Wisdom of Your Soul. And you can get that book, I'm sure, many places. Colleen, can you share with us where people can get your book?
It's available on Amazon. They can also go to my website, which is spiritualtelepathy.net, and read the introduction to the book. And then there's also several links on the site directly to Amazon.
Awesome. That's great. So spiritualtelepathy.net, and you can connect with Colleen and her book there. Colleen Mauro, Mauro, right, Colleen?
Mm-hmm.
Great. And I would highly suggest you get the book. And those of you who listen to this show, I know I've got a lot of wonderful listeners out there. This is so in the heart, in the zone of what Between Heaven and Earth is about. And Colleen has some wonderful techniques and things that you can do to really bring yourself to that next level and make contact with your soul. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've got for you in terms of developing your intuition. I've got the new class that's coming up in November, the weekend of November 7th and November 8th is Developing Your Intuition Level 1, and that's going to be in Tarrytown, New York at the DoubleTree Hotel. And this is a class that will teach you from scratch how to develop your intuition. And it goes from the basics of learning how, the step-by-step, how to develop your intuition to the point where you can use it when you want and on what you want and get detailed information. And I show you how to tell the difference between when you're getting a real intuitive message and when you're just making it up, and how to get intuitive messages more consistently and all the time. And also we talk about metaphysical energy and all this stuff that we've been touching on a little bit about energy and thought and how to work with that and how to work with protecting yourself from negative energy and how to get to a much higher level of intuition and control it. So that's going to be November 7th and 8th. You can go to my website at lmk88.com and find out more on how to sign up. And if you come in person, you'll get certified as a level 1 Developing Your Intuition graduate, and then be able to move on to the next levels. Also, in September 12th, that's coming up, but even sooner, I'm going to be a keynote speaker at the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo in Denver, Colorado. So if you're out in Denver, Colorado, come visit me there. I will be doing the keynote speech on the 10 Key Secrets to Intuition, and that's a 2-hour event for me there with you, and we're going to do some exercises, so we'll be able to work together in Denver, Colorado. So one more thing, if you go to my website, lmk88.com, and sign up for my newsletter, which I send out once a month, and you get intuition tips on how to develop your intuition, you will get a free e-book on how to develop your intuition and 16 exercises you can do on your own to develop your intuition. It's great stuff, and that's all free. Actually, I have a lot of free stuff out there, a lot of free videos. You just need to sign up and put your email address in so you can get the links to where you can get all that good stuff. So that is all for you on how to develop your intuition. So let's get back to our discussion with Colleen. Colleen, this is fascinating. I am really just absorbing all this wonderful stuff. You were talking about, as you're going through the process of, I guess, developing that spiritual telepathy, you had mentioned that you had to go through some steps first, purifying the body and then getting rid of the emotional issues. I love the whole thing about working on forgiveness and compassion. What other things did you have to do, or was that it?
Those are the main things. I went through a period where every time I sat down to meditate, all I could think about was how mad I was at this particular person.
Wow.
And it was so frustrating. It was someone that wouldn't sit down and try to resolve the issue. And I made some changes. I ended some relationships because I really saw that it was sort of
Sometimes we need to do that, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
we need to end relationships. And I think we keep them out of obligation, or we're waiting for them to do something. And it's just not, we do things that aren't really good for us. And
right.
You have to get
I did feel obligated to have
did you
a
really?
relationship. Yeah, to have some connection with this person because she was a friend of a really good friend. And I realized that it was too much for me. It just wasn't working, and I needed to step away.
Did you have I can imagine people would feel, that nobody likes conflict. And if you're going to end a relationship, then that's sometimes scarier than sticking with it. So did you have any of those feelings, and how did you deal with that? How did you?
It did cause problems when I said, I just don't feel like I could continue the relationship now. It did cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I missed the person, but ultimately it was the right thing for me to do.
Did you feel better?
Absolutely. I felt so much peace. And I wondered, why didn't I do this before? There was some reason that I thought I had to stay in contact.
There's some people that do that. They drain you. And there are people out there who make you feel bad. And it's not that they're trying to do something to you. That's just, their way of life, their way of looking at things just is draining, and, for whatever reason. And I guess it's not our job to fix them, right? You have to make that choice so that you can move on and do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. And it was something that Stephen really encouraged me to do. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I didn't know that I could just shut the door and walk away. I just didn't. And it was the right thing. So I'm really happy that I had that.
Everybody's responsible for themselves. So, you can kind of give that back to them. And I think when you do that, they can take on the responsibility to help themselves. Mm-hmm. So what happened after all that? You cleared the body, and you cleared your emotions, and you're doing this meditation. And how did your life change?
Well, I just felt so much more at peace, and I could quiet myself down. And I could do this meditation day by day. And I always thought that having contact with the soul was something that only more evolved people could have, or that I had to go into a monastery and devote my life to it. Mm-hmm. But what I discovered is that I felt a connection to my soul pretty early on, and it was wonderful. And there's a line in the Bible that if you draw near to God, He'll draw nearer to you.
Yes.
And it's the same with the soul. When we turn our attention upward, the soul turns our attention downward, its attention downward. And the bridge is actually built with the united effort of both the soul and the human personality. Mm-hmm. So we don't do it alone. We have this divine partner that's working with us. And as we approach the soul, we come under the influence of its higher vibration, and our own vibratory rate starts to speed up, like I mentioned before. And it's when the vibration of our mind and brain matches that of the soul that it becomes possible to enter the higher worlds at will. And it's our repeated contact with this energy that in the end will produce a new type of human, the soul-aligned human being. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we become pioneers as we lead the way from one stage of our human evolution to the next. It's an exciting time. And we have the ability to do that.
So how does all this work relate to intuition? What role does intuition play?
Well, I see it as the more advanced level, that our basic intuition gives us guidance about our day-to-day lives, but the soul knows our higher purpose, and it can help us understand the bigger picture. It is our most reliable sense of guidance and direction. That is sort of an advanced type of intuition.
Okay, so it's almost like you go with the basic intuition of, I knew that person was going to call me today, to the quote psychic realm, which we're going to go through, and then get to the next level of this different kind of intuition, which allows us to connect to our soul and hear what our soul is saying to us. That sounds like the progression. Am I right?
It is. I thought this really interesting too. I thought a lot about this. In the 70s, there was a big emphasis on psychism, and there was a lot of schools and books about...
What is psychism?
Yeah, it's just clairvoyance, basically.
Okay.
And it's from the astral level, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that was the 70s. In the 80s, channeling was the big thing. And so we were still getting
Yeah,
information
channeling.
from,
Right.
beyond, our own.
Seth with Jane Roberts.
Exactly. And
all
then in the 90s, intuition was really big. And now there's a step beyond that. So I think it all progresses.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that. I try to let people know that is my motivation. That was always my motivation, to develop my intuition. Other than, all the cool stuff in between was, it could be so helpful. It can tell me which way to go, how I'm going to avoid the traffic jam, or what's the best way to approach my boss so that I can, get the promotion. But then go beyond that and get to the enlightenment, which to me is that connection to your soul and being the walking saint, I guess. And you said something that was very interesting to me, which I felt as well, is that you had to be a special person to have that connection.
Right. That's what I thought. I remember watching this very cheesy made-for-TV movie about Joan of Arc, and I kind of sobbed through most of it because I felt such a longing to have that kind of contact. She talked to saints and angels, and I thought, why is it only some people that can do this? Eileen Caddy received the guidance that led to the founding of the Finhorn community in Scotland. I love that story.
Mm-hmm.
I loved reading about George Washington Carver, who walked in the woods each morning to talk to God. Apparently God talked back. He called it the divine radio. And I've always thought, why does it only happen to some people? Are they more evolved? Are they special somehow? And what was so fascinating to me as I immersed myself in this topic is to realize that we can all cultivate this ability, that it's in fact an evolutionary step.
Oh, I love that. That's my goal. That's what I want. And I think knowing that, I think that's part of our purpose on Earth is to, and a lot of the saints say that is your job here, is to serve and to connect with your soul. Mm-hmm. Wow, exciting. I love this conversation. I'm having so much fun. We're going to go to break and then we're going to come back and talk more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
And welcome back. I'm Lisa Kay, and you're listening to Between Heaven and Earth, Conscious Living for Your Soul. And we're talking to Colleen Mauro about spiritual telepathy and her new book. And It's a fascinating conversation. In fact, this is really what Between Heaven and Earth is all about. It's all about that connection and evolving and getting to the next level of where we need to be, both physically, mentally, spiritually. And we're going to live a beautiful life that way. So, Colleen, I wanted to talk a little bit more about, why. Actually, that's kind of a nice segue. I didn't even realize I was doing that. Why should we be doing spiritual telepathy?
Well, that's a great question. And I want to say also that I think your title is so perfect because when we build a bridge to the soul, we are bringing heaven to earth. So your show couldn't be more perfect to talk to.
Absolutely.
Stuff. And the reason it's so important right now is that when we contact the soul, everything changes. We lose our sense of separateness and we realize that we're part of a great universal life, the soul of humanity. And we find our place within the greater whole and we experience our connection with all of life and even with the earth itself. And you can imagine how the world would change if a critical mass of people made this shift. Barbara Marx Hubbard has written that those of us on Earth today are the crossover generation, responsible for leading the way from one stage of our species evolution to the next. Eckhart Tolle talks about this too, but in more stark terms. He writes that as a species, we have the choice now to evolve or die. They both say that evolution happens as a result of some sort of crisis that forces us or propels us to make a leap forward. Tolle uses the example of an amphibian who's forced to develop the ability to live on land after its habitat dries up, and our own habitat is in trouble, and we're faced with the same need now. Our world is full of conflict. We have loose nukes floating around. We need to make that shift. Not on
exactly.
But
the imbalances, the wars that are going on, the anger, the disparity of whatever it might be, and if nothing else, people are not happy. Right?
But imagine how things change if you realize that you're one with all souls.
Absolutely. Can you imagine if we were all saints? If we were all enlightened, if we were all connected, what a world this would be. We would have, let's see if we could imagine a little bit of it, I think, that we would all be connected, that we would be able to connect to people heart to heart, really know what's going on. And I think when you do that, there's the feeling of infinite and unconditional love, right?
If we felt connected with everything and everyone, how could we wage war? We couldn't be like waging war against.
No, we'd understand.
Ourselves.
We'd have that what do you call it? That grok, from the 80s. You'd grok it. You'd get everybody. You'd understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I think there would be no. Because you could put yourself in someone else's shoes instantaneously and understand. What a wonderful world that, and then you would also know the best way to do anything, to make the best decisions, to grow and expand and to produce bigger and better things, right? And we could do that en masse as a collective consciousness, as a group.
Absolutely.
Humanity.
And each one of us who makes that step makes it easier for those who follow. We sort of create an energetic morphic field, as Rupert Sheldrake says, that we put it out in the field, in the web, and it makes it easier for people that come behind us.
And I've noticed that not only in my own experience, but, they talk about that, what the Bible says, Jesus says, when two or more gather in my name. There is something about the energy and the feeling, and also the consciousness raises. I know that people who are in my class, when they get together, they're like, "Wow, I can do it in class. How come when I go home it's a little harder?" Part of it is because everybody's in that energy, right?
Right.
Awesome stuff. So tell us a little bit about the meditations that are in your book.
Well, there's 12 meditations in the book. 8 are for personal development, and 4 are service-oriented meditations.
What's a service meditation?
They're how we can serve on the inner planes to increase spiritual energy in the world. There's 4 different options.
Oh, that's just what we were talking about, right? Helping each other?
Right. There's 4 different options there. I also put refinement practices like harmlessness and the nightly review. I put the things that worked best for me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we do is called the nightly review, where we sit down and we sort of wind the day back and we just observe our behavior.
Wow, I'm going to do that. I like that.
Yeah, I had some really funny experiences with that. I was cooped up in Minnesota writing this book. I'm from California, so I was in snowy Minnesota, and my partner was also writing a book. And we were cooped up all winter, and we get on each other's nerves sometime. And I have a temper. And just when I was about to say something really snotty, I stopped because I realized I was going to have to think about this behavior in just a few short hours. And so you start to self-correct, and you start to shift your energy. It starts to happen automatically.
It's amazing how these practices shift people and change them without even thinking or knowing about it. I have a friend who's been practicing mindfulness, and he was noticing changes in his normal behavior for the better. So similarly to you, where the something similar like an anger that you normally get angry over or you normally react a certain way, all of a sudden it didn't happen. And it was like, where did that come from? So it sounds like you can do these meditations, you can do these practices, and even though you're not working at making it happen consciously, it happens unconsciously.
It's the practices that change us. That's what I've discovered.
Which is easy, right? It's almost like a recipe. You just do them.
Right, exactly. And the theory is important, so we can sort of have a framework, but it's the practice. Yeah,
so you go, oh, it's happening. It's working. I recognize that. I know what's happening, and that's okay. But it's so nice that you just do them, and I love the way you set it up so that it can fit your life. And so, if somebody were to get the book and you've got these 12 meditations, do they go through each one? Do they do maybe, a set of them for a few weeks and then do another set? How does it work?
Well, they're progressive. The first part of the book has the refinement practices. And I included, like I said, the ones that work best for me, but everybody's different. So you have to find what is needed and what meditations really speak to that. And then there's 3 progressive mind training meditations that allow us to quiet and focus the mind.
Oh, okay. And that could be a little scary for people, focusing the mind. Can you explain how maybe one of them works so that we have an understanding?
Yeah, there's a basic form of creative meditation in, I think it's chapter 6, and that's the Building the Bridge chapter. And then there's 2 more advanced
Can you
techniques
pick one?
in the next
Pick a simple one, or could you share it with us a little bit? Just describe it.
I have to find it. Basically, what it is, it's a mind training practice where we focus our attention at the soul star, and we hold it there for 10 minutes.
And what is the soul star?
Well, it's sort of a visual representation of the soul.
Okay,
we imagine a star about 6 inches above our head, and we focus our attention upward, and we hold it there. And we do that by focusing on what's called a seed thought, and that's the use of a sentence, word, or symbol.
Give us an example. What one would be?
The soul directs my daily life. And so what you do is you think about that, you stay focused on that sentence, and you look at it from all different angles. You think about the form, quality, purpose, and cause of each seed thought. And what this does is it allows you to focus your attention where you choose. It's easy to focus our attention on something that interests or intrigues us, but it's harder to focus on something just because we want to. So we're training the mind to be a tool, a servant, rather than our masters, because the mind usually drags us around wherever it wants. We're training it and telling it where to stay focused. And it's not easy, but it gets easier over time. One of the instructions that I got early on that I found very helpful is to imagine that you are preparing for a lecture on this topic. And you think about how you present it, and you think about it, from all different angles.
Because when you have to teach it, you really got to know it.
Exactly. So it makes it easy to keep your mind on it. And it's such a great feeling when you realize that 10 minutes have passed and you've managed to stay on that focused thought. So you are training your mind. Patanjali says that we have to be able to train the mind and focus the mind on an external object before we can focus it in the subtle worlds. So you have to have that kind of control. And all spiritual traditions have that as the first requirement.
And I think that's what gets people have some trepidation, because they're like, well, I can't quiet my mind. And, I've talked to many people who they just throw up their hands and say, I can't quiet my mind, and I tried to meditate. And I think that we can, and I think you just gave a really good example of how we do through when we are interested in something, we're focused, and we're focused on that one thing. And so it is doable. I think what some of the meditation practices of quieting your mind were, kind of boring. Well, stare at a candlelight, or, repeat the word pencil. I would go, that would make anybody crazy. So it sounds really wonderful that you've got these steps that people can use. They sound really not too hard to do at all. They're
not.
Yeah.
It's just consistency, and that's the thing that we all have to face. That it is consistency.
I think that if you're motivated to do it, that every little bit helps.
Think of it as like going to the gym. Instead of being an athlete training your muscles, you're training your mind, and so step by step, you're creating this command.
And eventually, you'll get to connect to yourself.
Exactly.
Wonderful, Colleen. We're at the end of our show. Thank you
for having me.
So much. Oh God, I love this. Will you come back, please?
Absolutely.
I would love to have you back, and we can, go more into how people can get that spiritual telepathy working, moving from intuitive to, enlightened. I'm Lisa Kay, and you've been listening to Between Heaven and Earth, Conscious Living for Your Soul. You can connect with me, and Colleen is at spiritualtelepathy.net, and I am at lmk88.com. Tune in next time right here on OMTimes Radio. We're going to see you then. Angel blessings to everyone.